Hello and welcome to Precon Decon, the video series where I deconstruct the pre-constructed decks of Magic the Gathering's history. In this video we're going to start looking at Champions of Kamigawa, which is the first set in the Kamigawa block, and we're going to start off by looking at Kami Reborn, which is a black and green deck. So let's look at the deck list here. So we have 23 creatures, we have 6 sorceries, 4 instants, 2 enchantments, 1 artifact, and 24 land, mana curve off to the side there. Let's start looking at these creatures. So, what's the actual theme of the deck? Well, let's talk a little bit about Kamigawa first. So, the big theme of Kamigawa was that it was the spirit world versus the mortal world. It was a war between gods and mortals. And basically, so there are spirits in every color. It's not like spirits are locked to a particular color or color combination. And one of the two defining things about spirits in the block were, I mean, firstly they were normally overcosted, but that's part of the abilities, but let's explain the abilities. So a lot of spirits have what was nicknamed Spirit Craft as an ability, which is basically whenever you play a spirit or an arcane spell, arcane being a subtype of instant and sorcery spells, you would get an effect. And the other ability spirits usually had was Soul Shift, which was like if it died, you could get a spirit with a certain mana value back from your graveyard back into your hand. So there was this kind of like recursion ability. But it did usually mean these were kind of like then overcosted, I think, to try and balance out those abilities. But anyway, so this is a deck all about spirits coming back from the graveyard, this kind of endless cycle of death and rebirth, which is honestly pretty cool. I did have this deck. I really enjoyed using it, honestly. So let's start looking at these cards and seeing how the deck did what it did. So I'm going to talk about Thief of Hope first, because Thief of Hope I think is actually one of the all-stars of the deck, just because it does everything that the deck is meant to be doing. So it's 3 mana for a 2/2. Whenever you cast a spirit or arcane spell, an opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life, and he has Soul Shift 2, which means that when he dies, you can get a spirit from your graveyard which has mana value 2 or less back into your hand. So it's like this kind of limited but free raised dead effect. So Thief Hope is kind of great because pretty much all your spells in the deck are spirit or arcane spells. So every time you cast them, you're getting like this kind of little point of life drain, and it really does add up. I can say that from experience. It really does add up just having just a Thief Hope chipping away sort of 1 or 2 life every turn. And then when he dies, he gets back one of your smaller utility spirits, of which there are quite a few. So Thief Hope is great. We have 2 Berg Rafters, so it's 4 mana 2/2. You can sacrifice it to give a creature +2/+2, and it has Soul Shift. So being a 2/2 with no abilities for 4 mana is obviously not wonderful. But his sacrifice ability at least doesn't cost any mana, and then when he sacrifices, you get to Soul Shift. You get to get something back with 3 or less, like a Thief of Hope. So, not awful. At least there's a synergy there. We have 2 Gibbering Kami, 4 mana for a 2/2 flyer. It has Soul Shift 3, so kind of a little overcosted for a 2/2 flyer, but again has like this kind of raised dead effect. And then Kami of Lunacy, who definitely is overcosted in my opinion. 6 mana for a 4/1 flyer and has Soul Shift 5. I think definitely would have been fine to have like an extra point of toughness personally, but we're going to see this in all throughout Kamigawa, really, of like kind of creatures being a bit overcosted, honestly, and having kind of like not impressive like stat lines. As a whole, Kamigawa is quite a underpowered block, and I think that's part of the reason why it wasn't received too well. We have 2 Scuttling Deaths, so 5 mana 4/2. You can sacrifice to give a creature -1/-1 to land descent, and has Soul Shift 4. So same thing as the Berg Rafter. It can sacrifice itself for free to do its Soul Shift effect. -1/-1 is obviously not very impressive, but at least it kills small utility creatures. Yeah, fine, I guess. Venerable Kumo is 5 mana for a 2/3 reach with Soul Shift. Like the Kami of Lunacy, this one is definitely overcosted. Even with the Soul Shift ability, like 5 mana for a 2/3 for reach is like just not very impressive at all. And then again, like the other stars of the deck, in my opinion, these Zuberas. So they're kind of like a subclass of spirit. And basically they all have like these kind of effects that matter more depending how many Zuberas have died that turn, which is is a really cool design. I actually really like it. There's like one in each color in this block, and then weirdly there's only like two more in red and blue. Like in a later set there wasn't, you know, like a second full cycle of them. It's really weird, but anyway. So Ashen Skin Zubera is 2 mana for 1/2. When it dies, an opponent discards a card for every Zubera that's died that turn, which is pretty cool. And Dripping Tongue Zubera, who is in my opinion the better one. 2 mana for a 1/2, and when he dies, it replaces itself with a 1/1 color spirit for every Zubera that's died that turn. So with these Zuberas, if you can find a way of like sacrificing or getting them killed off at the same time, then all those triggers stack and like see each other, and like you basically get more bang for your buck essentially. And as we'll see later, there is a card that lets you sacrifice things. Sacrifice multiple things at the same time. So yeah, these guys were great. So one of the rares of the deck is Iname, Death Aspect. So 6 mana for a 4/4. When you enter the battlefield, you can search your library for any number of spirit cards, put them into your graveyard, and then shuffle. So yeah, this is pretty good, I think. In a way, it's kind of like a very janky tutor. You just dump a bunch of spirits into your graveyard, and then they're there ready for soul shifting, I suppose. I used to have a deck years and years ago using Inami and like the Black Enchantment Mortal Combat, which is at the start of your turn, if you have 20 or more creatures in your graveyard, you win. So I would just like play Inami and like dump a whole deck full of like black spirits or like changelings and stuff into the graveyard and just be like, aha, I win because of Inami, which is it's fine. It was a fun deck. But yeah, I think Inami's okay. Again, I do think kind of overcosted. I don't think it would, because it's got no abilities. I think it would have been fine to be like a 5/5 or a 6/4 or something, but maybe I'm just being greedy. And then we have 2 Hanakamis. So this Hanakami is also pretty great. 1 green mana for a 1/1. 1 cost 1 green, sacrifice it, get an arcane card from your graveyard back to your hand. So you've got a lot of arcane cards in the deck that you definitely want to recur. So yeah, Hanakami is pretty great, helps you do that. 2 Kami of the Hunt, 3 mana for a 2/2, has Spiritcraft, gets +1/+1 till end of turn. Fine, just kind of boring, honestly. But it's okay. It's okay. And then 2 Soil Shapers, 2 mana for a 1/1, has a Spiritcraft ability to turn a land into a 3/3 creature until end of turn. It really bothers me that the land that gets animated isn't like a spirit or an elemental or something. It just really, really bothers me that it has no creature types. But yeah, Soil Shaper's like okay, the thing is, like, you're playing a Spirit Arcane spell, you're getting the effect of your Spirit Arcane spell, and then you're getting like this extra bonus. The thing is, though, like, it's not optional. Like, you do have to do it, but you can do it onto an opponent's land if you really wanted to, I suppose. And then we have a couple of shrines. Now, the shrines are pretty fun. This is where they first showed up, because we have more shrines in Neon Dynasty, and we had shrines in one of the core sets, I think, Magic 2019. But yeah, this is where they first showed up, and shrines are pretty great. Basically, the whole idea with shrines is they're legendary enchantments, and their effects get better the more shrines you have. So Honden of Life's Web is 5 mana. At the beginning of your upkeep, you get a 1/1 color spirit creature token for every shrine you control, and Honden's of Night's Reach is at the beginning of your upkeep, an opponent discards a card for every shrine you control. So I should generally think if you got both of these out, it would be pretty hard for an opponent to deal with. Like, if you left them and didn't deal with these shrines, it would be tough, because like then you're getting 2 tokens for free every turn, and you're making someone discard 2 cards every turn. So yeah, I think puts a lot of pressure on someone to have both of these shrines out. And then the other rare of the deck is Long Forgotten Gohei. So 3 mana artifact, arcane spells you play cost 1 less to play, and spirits you control get +1/+1. Just a really like solid, kind of a little boring, but like a really just efficient, good effect. Like, it's not flashy, but you'll definitely appreciate it. And I think this also marks kind of like this transition period now in card design, where these kind of like buff effects, these anthem effects or cost reduction effects, are starting to affect only like your stuff. Whereas I think like in older sets, this would have affected like everyone. Like, all arcane spells are 1 less to play, and all spirits get +1/+1. Which I'm really glad it starts going towards this this design of it only affecting your stuff, because I think avoids this kind of like feel bad situation of you play a card and it ends up benefiting your opponent more. So yeah, I like Long Forgotten Gohei. So now we have some arcane spells. So we have 2 Kadama's Might. Oh, we get to talk about Splice now as well, which is good. So we've talked about Soul Shift, we've talked about Spiritcraft, so now we get to talk about Splice. So firstly, let's get the normal out of the way. So it's 1 green, instant, gives +2/+2 to end of turn. And it has Splice onto Arcane. So Splice, as we can see from the reminder text, as you play an arcane spell, you can reveal this card from your hand, play its Splice cost, in this case 1 green, and if you do, add this card's text, or this card's effect even, in which case target creature gets +2/+2 to end of turn, to that spell. So for example, you could do Kadama's Reach for 3, and because it's an arcane spell, you can say, right, I'm going to Splice Kadama's Might onto it. You just reveal the card, you don't discard Kadama's Might, you just reveal it from hand, pay 1 green, so then Kadama's Reach does its effect, and then also, it gives a creature +2/+2 until end of turn as well. So I really like Splice as a concept. I was, in practice, it was a little bit janky, just because this is, Kadama's Might is kind of the exception, because a lot of other, these cards that had Splice, actually the Splice costs were pretty expensive, and I don't really remember people really splicing cards that much. There is there is a combo out there with like Lava Spike, Desperate Ritual, and Is It Guild Mage. If you have time, look that up, because that's a fun combo, and requires, and it's good as well because it requires quite a bit of rules knowledge, so get a better understanding of the game. But Kadama's Might, perfectly fine. It's the pump spell of the block. Kadama's Reach, also perfectly good. 3 mana. You get 2 basic lands from your library, 1 into hand and 1 into play tapped. Super good. It gets a functional reprint a few years later as Cultivate, which is really fun. But this is the first time it showed up. So yep, Kadama's Reach, really good. And Dance of Shadows, 5 mana sorcery, gives your creatures +1/+0 and fear until end of turn. Maybe a little expensive, but like it does have the potential of making your whole board unblockable for a turn. But then again, this isn't like, I feel like really a deck that's trying to win with combat damage, really, or that's not like the primary path to victory. It's really, I think, about draining things away with Thief of Hope and some like your other spells, and kind of like wearing your opponent down very gradually. So a few more arcane spells. So we have Pull Under. So this is 6 mana for an arcane instant. Target creature gets -5/-5 to end of turn. That's a really big drop. I think that kills pretty much anything in the set, honestly. But 6 mana is so expensive. Yeah. Very expensive card. Devouring Greed. This is great. This is like, I think, like the other star of the deck next to Thief of Hope. So 4 mana, arcane sorcery. As an additional cost to play it, sacrifice any number of spirits, like your Zubera. Target player loses 2 life +2 life for every spirit sacrificed this way, and then you gain that much life. So this, I feel, is like one of the primary win conditions, and I kind of wish there'd been, I can't believe it's common as well, actually, I've just seen that, my word. There definitely, I feel like, should have been at least another copy of this, because this is, I think, primary win condition. Because it was like the primary win condition when I used to play this deck. Like, you just get a load of spirits out, sacrifice them all to Devouring Greed, and just like end the game there with a huge life swing. Or if it didn't end the game, it at least put you like so far ahead, you had like such a good advantage just to then close out maybe a few turns later. So yeah, Devouring Greed, super good card, and it combos really well with the Zubera, especially Dripping Tongue Zubera, because you sacrifice those, you get the effect, you get more life out of it, and then the Zuberas create more spirit tokens, which you can then sacrifice to another Devouring Greed. So yeah, great card in my opinion. And Swallowing Plague is pretty cool. It's like an X spell that just hits creatures, but gives you life. So yeah, perfectly fine. So what could have been? So overall, I do think the deck is pretty solid. I'm not saying it's perfect. There's a few duff cards in there, like Kami of Lunacy, I don't think is too great, or Soil Shaper, I don't think really has a place in here either. But anyway, so let's quickly talk about some alternate cards that could have gone here. Hideous Laughter is just -2/-2 to everything, and you can splice it. Rend Flesh is an amazing kill spell, and I will die on the hill that it's still good by today's standards. So it's 3 mana for an arcane instant, and destroys a non-spirit creature. And I remember at the time, like, my group were really excited about Rend Flesh. Pretty much anyone who was playing a deck, a black deck was running Rend Flesh because it was better than Terror or Dark Banishing because it could hit. It could hit black creatures. It wasn't color locked, and like the drawback of like, oh, it can't hit spirits. Like, who cares? Like, it hits all the other creature types in the game. So Rend Flesh, super good removal spell, and like it's actually kind of crazy. It's not in any Kamigawa pre-constructed decks that I can think of. Soulless Revival is just Raise Dead with Splice, fine. Wear Away is just Naturalize with Splice, again, fine. Root Runner is actually kind of interesting. So it's 4 mana for a 3/3, which is actually decently costed. It has Soul Shift as well, which is good. So it's not kind of overcosted for having Soul Shift, and has an ability where you can sacrifice it to put a land back on top of its owner's library, which so like weirdly time walks someone, which is it's like such a weird effect. It is an effect that sometimes shows up in green. We haven't seen it in forever because it's sort of technically land destruction. In a way, or it's like soft land destruction. But yeah, like Root Runner could have been fun in here. So alternate rares, I thought He Who Hungers might be okay. Maybe like 5 mana as a 3/2 flyer, and you sacrifice spirits, and you can then like do a coercion effect on someone. But like in retrospect, I'm not so keen on that. I think Inami Life Aspect would have been more fun. So I think either should have been Life Aspect instead of Death Aspect, or get rid of the Go Hate and have both of them, because they obviously combo together really well. So basically, Death Aspect dumps all your spirits into your graveyard, and then Life Aspect can bring them all back. But like, he has to die first. When Life Aspect is put into a graveyard from play, you can exile it and then get all your spirits back from your graveyard to your hand. Yeah, I just think like both those effects would have been kind of fun to have in the same deck. Maybe, I don't know. Funny thing is that Inami does show up again in the last set in Saviors as Inami as one, where he's literally the 2 cards combined. Like, so he's 12 mana for an 8/8. But his effect is really weak. I can't remember what it is off the top of my head. I think it's just like reanimate a spirit from a graveyard. It's really not worth paying 12 mana for. But yeah, those are just some thoughts. But overall, I do think the deck is pretty solid. I do really like this deck. I have a lot of nostalgia for it. It's kind of like the first deck where I bought 2 of them and just mashed them together to have like to double up on the good cards, to have like 4 Thief of Hope, 4 of each Zubera, that kind of thing. So yeah, really like this deck, and yeah, had a lot of fun using it back in the day. But what are your thoughts on the deck after seeing the deck list? Did you also have this deck, or did you play it? What changes did you make to it? If you want to stick a comment below, that'd be great. I'd love to hear some stories about this deck, because it is actually generally one of my favorites. It is my favorite Kamigawa block pre-constructed deck. So yeah, it'd be really cool to hear what people think about this one. But I will be back next time to look at another Kamigawa pre-constructed deck. But until then, thank you for watching and listening, and have a great day.